Hello and welcome, everyone. This is Beverly. I'm from DigiLeaders. Thank you for attending this session, Destination Experimentation by Netcel. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping. At the moment, your microphone and your camera are automatically turned off, but throughout the presentation, we encourage that you join us by using the chat button at the lower part of your screen. If you click on that, you can start sending us a message to participate. You can also submit your questions throughout the presentation, and after Dom and Justin do their presentation, we will then answer those questions for you. So before we get started, allow me to please introduce our speakers. So we have Dom Graveson. Dom is a leader and senior practitioner of digital capability transformation and product strategy. He has deep experience, both agency and client side, across multiple sectors, including government, financial services, education, and travel. He has over 15 years experience in both the strategy and day-to-day delivery of reality of evidence-led digital and organizational transformation, digital product research, development, launch, and growth. We will also have Justin Masters with us, an experienced CTO and leader of the data and tech strategy practice at Netcel. Justin is an advocate of building the right things right. Combining his extensive experience, technical knowledge, and strategic thinking, he ensures our clients realize their digital vision. Justin is an Optimizely most valued professional and member of the exclusive Optimizely Partner Inner Circle. Justin and Dom, thank you for joining us in this session, and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, and hello, everybody. Thank you all for joining us for our talk and our exploration of experimentation and the benefits it can bring, particularly within the public service sector. We're Justin and Dom, as Bev has mentioned, and from Netcel. So Netcel exists to build transformative digital products and experiences that deliver outstanding outcomes for users and clients. We think it's important that the experiences we build are accessible, clear, easy to use, ethical, efficient, and sustainable. We work for a broad range of sectors, from business to financial services, but also works with government and education and not-for-profits. And we build these products on the digital experience platform Optimizely, which supports the delivery of complex, hyper-personalized, enterprise-scale digital experiences. And a big part of that is experimentation as the driving force behind innovation and continuous improvement of those experiences. So kind of why are we here, and what's the context? Well, the world is changing fast. That's not news. We hear it all the time, but it is very real. A year ago, I don't think any of us would have imagined that we would be prioritizing healthcare and providing healthcare and prioritizing that for supporting Ukrainians living in the UK displaced by war. But now here we are. Things change very quickly, and we need to be adaptive and fast to move to respond to them. Pressure on public services has never been greater. Budgets, changing political agendas, staffing, and the changing public expectations and social makeups are all really important and powerful factors that we need to take account for and respond to. And that change requires robust, evidence-based approaches to be able to enable us to move fast. So as the world demands more from public services, those building, maintaining, and delivering them will need to innovate to find ways to meet demand within the challenges and constraints we all face. It's happening at the national level right now, with countries like Lithuania building their entire citizen infrastructure on digital platforms, providing flexibility, citizen centricity, and robust approaches to new threats, be they political, cyber, and military. Smart cities like the regeneration of Oslo, where digital and physical services are being built around the needs of citizens, with a new focus on work-life balance, bringing up children, natural open spaces, flexibility in healthcare and education, all as drivers for that design. And key public service infrastructure within the UK is going digital, driven by the pandemic and new preferences in how people want to engage with services, both old and new. Whatever the scale and composition of these services, they're all being delivered and developed through a process of innovation led by imagination, insights, and data. And these new products and services are developed and improved by iterative experimentation at their heart. So what is experimentation? Well, it lies at the heart of innovation. It helps us discover, evaluate, and prioritize what we build and what we invest in. Experimentation is the framework for strategic decision-making, both at the macro level and at the micro level, from what services we provide to what color a button might be. It's building the right things for the right reasons in the right way.
And experimentation also requires the right blend of ingredients. It's the right data to create the insights, to surface a need to experiment, and the measures of success. The data and insights drive the hypotheses to test in our experiments, and the experiments themselves, together with the appropriate metrics, to understand the impact of the experiments. Understanding the appropriate metrics is perhaps one of your highest priorities in experimentation.
So experimentation really is a foundation of strategic decision-making and innovation. And that's what this week is all about. So it makes sense that we're talking about it, right? So how might we think about experiments? We might think along these lines. We use data to uncover patterns and insights, which inform an idea. It's my hypothesis, which then we can test through an experiment. So an example of that might be, in a public service setting, our patients aren't making appointments through our online portal. The data shows that they're still calling reception with lots of questions about our over 50s health check service we're trying to promote. So given that insight, I think that perhaps we should experiment with making more information available and better signposting of it as part of the online booking journey. So to explain to people what they might expect from the appointment. So I can test this by presenting a new experience with more simplified, more visible information to some users and see if we get better numbers of people completing the appointment booking journey. So we're using insights from the data, and our curiosity from our imagination is leading to a hypothesis, to propose some science to validate that hypothesis, to test it. So that, put simply, is experimentation. Experimentation is a combination of insights, imagination, and science, but you do need an open mind.
Experimentation is about finding the right and the wrong answers as quickly as possible to enable you to move further and faster. Delivering a data-driven decision and not blindly following the highest paid person's opinion or the hippo. There are many case studies on the culture of experimentation, particularly those adopted by Booking.com. Booking.com are consistently running hundreds of thousands of experiments simultaneously to establish what materially makes a difference, and importantly, what doesn't, or indeed what has a negative impact. The ideas for those experiments come from senior management or any employee at any level. Booking.com, along with many other data-driven experiment-led organizations, do not rely on opinion. Experimentation isn't just about identifying successes, it's also about early identification of flawed hypotheses or simply bad ideas before significant investment is made. Experimentation is about where we are wrong as much as where we are right. And it's important to understand that experimentation goes beyond the digital channels.
So experiences, as Justin said, go across more than just the app or your website. It's end-to-end that you need to think about when designing experiments. What is the whole experience for your audience? How might it go beyond the boundaries of what is in the control of your organization or service? Let's look at an example of someone struggling with rent arrears. They may have been worrying about this for a while. It may have caused significant stress. They may have explored other options, and they may have struggled with some unpleasant experiences in the past. All of this will interact. All of this will influence how they interact with you. And all the experiences are made up of different stuff. Their motivations, failed previous attempts, prejudices, opinions, and advice from others, influences both positive and negative. And only some of the experience is actually what you provide or your touch points. So you have a very limited control. And you're maybe only measuring some aspects of even those touch points that you provide. So you also have a very incomplete picture. However comprehensive you're in analytics, it is unlikely you have the whole picture. And you are connecting, and are you connecting your different insight sources? that's qualitative, such as user feedback, and quantitative, analytics and measurements, and across the whole end-to-end experience. In this example, we're measuring just the digital aspects, but it's critical to think of the broader experiential context for each user group or each user, and the impact that those other stages that you don't have control over can have on the user's experience. So with experimentation, we need to be prepared by understanding the basic principles of experimentation, which are crucial to making it work and scale. It's bringing together the right ideas, that's evidence-led hypothesis, which makes our decision-making better than guessing. Combining that with the right data, that's a shared available truth, no substitute for real-world observations, and the right process. And here we mean ways of working and the platform for delivering experiments efficiently and in a consistent, operationalized way. So what does digital experimentation look like? There are some typical approaches you might already have seen.
Experiments can take a number of different forms. Experimentation is often talked about in context of A/B testing a web page. However, it's much more than simply two variants, and there are reasons why you may undertake one type of test over another. You've got A/B, multivariate, multi-page, multi-arm bandits. They all have their place in the process of experimentation. It's important to be able to apply the right experimentation method to the right scenario to extract the right insights. Experiments are not just limited to web pages, mobile experiences and UI. There can be server-side logic as well, and use techniques such as full stack experiments or feature flagging to roll out new features to specific segments, supporting testing of those new features, enabling quick rollback if required without new deployments. How long you plan to run an experiment over is another variable to consider, as that will impact the volume of traffic and therefore the statistical significance of the experiment results. As Dom talked earlier about this formula, so let's explore it a little more. Fuel for experimentation is ensuring that a good data practice exists. Data doesn't happen by accident, and organizations have lots of data, but being data-driven is a result of a data strategy that many organizations simply don't have. Understanding the outcomes you're driving towards means you can build a data strategy to support this, capturing the right data, allowing for the analysis, automate or otherwise, to identify the opportunities for improvement, where we're hitting the right metric, where we're not, and where we're not sure the difference we could actually make. Some analysis will be deterministic, some will just allow for the creation of new ideas or new hypotheses. However, it's the fuel behind a data-driven and experimentation culture.
And from an imagination point of view, it's important that everyone feels that they can come with an idea for improvement, as long as it's based on real insights. But back to the hippo, opinion is okay, strong opinion is great, and years of experience does count for a huge amount, but we need to approach things with a beginner's mind and prepare to be wrong. And expect those big hippo ideas to be challenged in the same way, subject to the same experimentation, rigor, and validated using real data to inform a decision. Making this framework for decision-making is critical in building the trust necessary for a healthy experimentation culture. The same rules apply for everyone. Show how this works and share the workings with everyone so they know what's happening to the ideas, to their ideas, and what makes or breaks an initiative. Encourage folks to welcome failure as a path to success. Building effective experimentation will impact across several factors. It will impact how you behave, discuss, and evaluate ideas and flatten hierarchies. It'll require new skills in data analysis, developing a solid, robust, testable hypothesis, and the tools to surface data to derive insights, deliver experimentation across your customer channels, and evaluate them across qualitative and quantitative data points. And good experiment practice itself is important. You need to identify and articulate and define an approach to experimentation, and we'll look at this shortly in a bit more detail. And as we said before, experimentation is something that you can do on probably only part of your customer or user's end-to-end experience. An idea is not an experiment in itself. An experiment needs the following components: the insight that led to the hypothesis, some learning that suggests that in order to do it better, we could do something differently. A testable hypothesis. We believe that in order to get this desired outcome, we should do this thing. And the test itself. In order to prove this thing will deliver an improvement, we will test it by changing these factors, design, messaging, etc., and gathering this data. The analysis, and then the analysis. So we will analyze this data in a way that to derive meaning and a conclusion that is meaningful and we can act upon. You'll need to assign measures of the improvement. An OKR is framework is good, and you may be familiar with that. If you want 10% more online sales as an outcome, what would you measure as a key result of that? Page clicks, PDF document downloads, funnel dropouts? You need to make sure that you can actually get these measures from your data estate. Do your analytics systems even deliver this data? And that's all important because you can't make decisions without it. And before you start, agree on how. Once you have looked at insights and developed some experimentation ideas, you will prioritize the experiments by expected impact on your strategic objectives. You can look at reach. How many people will this impact across your audience? How much impact will it have for individuals? Will it make a big difference or a small difference, marginal? Do you have a large amount of confidence that this change will deliver a good result? How much effort or investment might it take? Or how much change or disruption could it cause within the organization? And how much risk might there be? All of these things can help you make that decision.
But the reality of doing this is it's difficult. Starting to experiment is hard, and then scaling is even harder. Technology and experimentation platforms provide capability. Today, we can run multiple experiments simultaneously. However, there's an experimentation gap between organizations who are running a small number of experiments per month and those that have experimentation at their core of digital operations, and they are consistently running over 100 experiments per month. It's important to set a baseline for what success through experimentation actually looks like, and this can help scale and grow the team supporting experimentation and enable senior level buy-in. And once you're able to bridge the experimentation gap, the rate of learning and therefore progression towards successful outcomes can really accelerate. When you're running multiple simultaneous experiments, be able to understand just because an idea didn't work, it doesn't mean that a variation of that idea or alternative of it won't work. You'll be able to test rapidly that theory and analyze the outcomes.
And there's been a lot of studies from serious senior academics and business researchers to prove the value of experimentation. HBR have published work on A/B testing showing double-digit improvements against a number of control scenarios. MIT and EY are amongst others that have found significant advantages. Leading thinkers are applying this to business and publishing some really great books on the subject. So let's look at the process. We will include some of the measurements of the effectiveness of experimentation while we talk through it. So let's take a quick tour of the approach and pick out some interesting ideas on the journey. It's broadly across 6 stages, broadly recognizable from product management, product development or design thinking, or elements of lean. So a lot of you will recognize this approach. So we'll take each stage in turn briefly. The first phase is the ideate phase, understanding what the insights tell us and developing a hypothesis to test. Remember the process again, uncovering the patterns and insights from the data, which will inform a hypothesis for improvement, which we can validate through an experiment. And the process, the learning that suggests that in order to do it better, we could do something differently. We believe that in order to get this desired outcome, we should do this initiative. By changing certain factors, design, messaging, and gathering the appropriate data. And finally, the analysis. We will analyze the collected data in a way to derive meaning and conclusion. So going back to our examples, our patients aren't making appointments for our over 50s health check. Making more information available and better signposted as part of the booking journey might help. So I can test this by presenting new experiences to a segmented group and adjust content, and we can measure how this changes the numbers that are booking and also measure the reduced call to reception. So that's an online and an offline measure. There may be a number of other tests that we might want to do as well on other hypotheses. Perhaps it's about tailoring the content more specifically to the kind of demographic we're targeting, or the way that we use images to reflect a more relaxed atmosphere at the appointment, or even providing some anonymized references from people who have actually had the health check, talking about how it was for them. This is how we generate the ideas to test and scope how we will test them, and we will need to build a prioritized backlog for our experiments. But you need to give yourself freedom. Don't just test one variation against the current live experience. Fewer options tend to drive bias. Was it enough of a variant to really push the envelope? Is it the alternative that you're testing an ideation that just came from the loudest voice in the room again, or the biggest hippo? More variations open up greater possibilities and make you braver. One option that's safe, one option that's the one you will all agree on, but also have one outlier. And as we shall see, outliers drive often the biggest payback. It's also simple statistics. More options you have, the bigger chance of getting it right. If you aren't playing the lottery, but the more tickets you buy, the more chance it could be you.
Establishing which hypotheses to prioritize and test first is linked to modeling. Knowing where the key revenue or conversion drivers are and the potential impacts of metric increases is fundamental. So having a model that looks at the impact of metric increases based on experiments helps to make guided decisions which will assist not only in the planning, but also to gain senior level buy-in. There's no magic involved. Use a process, set some benchmarks that are based on data points. And those could be improved site performance, helping your customers get the most out of digital products, as well as your internal metric improvements.
And picking up from the idea that more variants make for a better chance of success, also bigger variations, bolder variations also tend to deliver greater outcomes. Tweaking the edges is fine and important, but throw in an opportunity to discover something special and new by going outside the box. This concept of disrupting yourself is incredibly powerful and carries a lot of opportunity. If you don't do it, someone else is likely to. This is how businesses like Amazon, Airbnb, and TikTok innovate so fast. They have a prioritized backlog of experiments based on the anticipated impact they expect. By looking at your analytics, you can identify what's working and what isn't. And this is how and why data and robust measurement is so important. So you can generate meaningful variations. Don't scattergun too much, but do combine small tweaks with a self-disruptor and some envelope-pushing thinking. AI might have a role here. ChatGPT, image and video generation, can offer a way of accelerating developing options, and if trained on the right data set, can actually be made quite pretty high quality, and they are getting better very quickly. AI also has a role in co-piloting for developers, making for faster turnarounds of greater numbers of ideas, helping you scale. Experimentation means creating options for your experiments. That's more development potentially, and this can take more time. So the more you can streamline, the lower will be your overheads.
To expand and future gaze for a minute, what might AI mean in the context of experimentation? It's probably fair to say that we're still relatively early in the exploration of how AI will impact experimentation beyond data and statistics modeling. Some of the technology already exists, so you can use AI to determine based on specific events who to target experiments at, or how to adapt an experience dynamically. If you consider that personalization is perhaps just a form of experimentation, using AI to drive personalization we see in many forms today is perhaps the key to personalization at scale. Surely a future state for experimentation at scale is an AI-powered world where the content and imagery is either helped by AI or even generated dynamically by AI, adapting, learning as it goes, creating thousands of variations of content, maybe even of layouts, consistently find a variation that works best today, maybe a different one tomorrow, or maybe even a different variation created and adapted based on the behavior and interactions of individual users across digital and non-digital channels. We're at the beginning of the AI adoption in the digital world. I feel we're still in probably the early days. However, AI is likely to form a key foundation of experimentation and innovation. When planning the execution of your experiments, there's three key aspects to bear in mind. Those include using the available data, research and knowledge of your users to estimate when the right time is to run your experiments, and indeed who to include in those experiments. Using the right testing techniques such as multi-arm bandits and statistics acceleration to dynamically allocate traffic to experiments based on real-time success. And building your experimentation culture to a stage where you're able to run multiple experiments simultaneously to learn and adapt faster. But there is a balance between developer-free experiments and the value of those involving more engineering resource. Analysis has shown that more lines of code involved in an experiment, not necessarily more complex, just potentially more significant variations between the experiments, the more significant effect you can have on the key metrics. Experiments don't have to be kept simple. Multiple changes across multiple variations, including visible UI adaptations, as well as server-side logic changes, can be used within experimentation to deliver results and the outcomes that are being looked for.
So what do we do when it comes to analysis? Well, it's about understanding communication. We said science is a key ingredient earlier, but good science is about being accessible and actionable. So we need to make the conclusions as simple as possible and as easily understood. And we need to discuss them. So your conclusions might benefit from another perspective, from another colleague in another department, or with another point of view. Combine data from experiments with other customer experience data from across the journeys. Remember, you can't measure everything. Try as much as possible to be aware of other factors that could influence people. It could be the time of day that they experience the touch point. It could be their state of mind. Maybe they're delighted, maybe they're frustrated, perhaps they're tired, or their previous experiences with either your services or other services similarly that might have built a prejudice. All these might influence behavior and your experimental outcomes, as will how you analyze the resulting data. Statistics goes a long way, but you need to combine it with human interpretation and feedback. Remember, it's a combination of insights, imagination, and science. Multiple data points are important too. So using analytics from a number of sources, using the tooling to provide the statistical analysis of the experiments is important to help us understand. But ultimately, the more data we can capture, the more data we can analyze, and therefore the more we can learn from our experiments. Include feedback and talking to people for qualitative interviews, feedback forms, and anecdotal experience from frontline teams, which I have found to be very powerful in terms of giving you another perspective. And finally, iterate. Don't expect to get it right first time. You won't. You may find that you need to check your answers. Results aren't always conclusive. So that doesn't mean that your experiment was a failure. It probably means that you need to look harder at the conclusions and other impacting factors. You might need to adjust how you tested. Did you have a robust control? Were you measuring even the right analytics to uncover a validation of the hypothesis in the first place? Did confirmation bias get in the way of seeing the real story? Anticipate and build in iterations and cycles of experimentation. It's how you will build the culture, skills, and familiarity with the methods and tooling. And it helps you manage your senior stakeholders to expect this to take time and help them commit to a number of cycles, enabling you to get started. The more you do it, the more you will improve. As you can see here, the greater the variation, the more experiments, the better a team will get. And the braver they will get as well. So the greater the variations, the greater the chance of hitting the jackpot, or at least finding a new benchmark for your experience. And you can run bigger, more ambitious experiments with the more experience you gain. The more impact and improvement will unlock more investment too, as you build muscle in experimentation and prove the value of doing it as part of your standard digital operations. So this works at all levels, getting started, learning to walk, and then as you scale and fly. Many organizations are so convinced by experimentation, they won't go without it. So organizations like Sky TV in the UK only introduce a new feature that have been the result of a successful experiment. If you want to go live with a feature without an experiment there first, you have to get C-suite sign-off. So they're very committed to it.
Getting started with experimentation or even evolving your experimentation needs is supported by having the right platform to support your goals. Google recently announced in their sunsetting of Google Optimize later in 2023, later this year, there's left over 500,000 organizations considering what their next step is for experimentation. There are many facets to selecting technology platforms. It's not made any easier with a number of good platforms that are available today. Here we've identified some criteria you might want to consider across platform and organizational needs, either when considering where to go from Google Optimize, or if you're just starting out, or there's a need to mature your experimentation capability. If I were to pick out a few key criteria I want to be focused on, there would be, is there value in having the ability to take experimentation beyond the UI, the website or app, and into feature rollouts or other areas of my digital estate beyond the website? I want to mature my experimentation capability. Can I run the volume of concurrent experiments I anticipate needing? Can I get fast and accurate results that don't require a master's degree or a data scientist to interpret them? Can I target who to include in an experiment and adjust this dynamically, either manually or through AI? And do I have the vendor or partner support in place to help me to develop an experimentation culture? There are many platforms on the market today. Netcel would choose to work with Optimizely, not to be confused with Google Optimize. Optimizely are a market-leading platform, one of the key platforms Google themselves have recommended with the sunsetting of their own Optimized product. And Optimizely supports early stage adoption of experimentation all the way through to organizations running very mature experimentation programs. If you're in the market for a new platform results of Google's decision to sunset Optimize, then Optimizely, like many other vendors, are offering a discount today for Google Optimize customers. And obviously, we'd be happy to help put you in touch with the right people.
So we've come a long way from the public services of the old days, libraries, for example, but people's needs remain the same: to be informed, educated, supported, kept healthy, and feeling safe. And innovation is key to evolving your services to meet the needs as they evolve with your users. You can experiment very fast across digital experiences, and this can help inform experiences that cross both digital and physical channels and touch points. And it can give you insights into parts of the experience that maybe you don't control, such as the reading of the books and the feeling of having to pay the fine for overdue ones. Perhaps experimentation could have addressed challenges like that. So some takeaways, as all these presentations need takeaways, don't they? So how do you get started? Well, don't expect awesomeness from day one. It's going to take time. Explain this to your stakeholders and colleagues and start small and focused. Improve your content, optimize your transaction funnels, like our example with the health check appointment booking thing. 2, start early to build a business case and a benefits case for your experimentation. Measure the value, define your outcomes and the key results you will measure. Prove the value of experimentation in ways that your colleagues recognize and has meaning for them as well as with them just to have meaning for you. Make sure you work with your IT, data, and business information teams to clearly define your measures and show understanding for their challenges. They might need support too. They may not share the same priorities as you. You need to work together. Build support through the business case and benefits case and simple outcomes-focused communications. Expect to have to learn new skills, supplement from outside where needed. And don't struggle alone. The support of digital experimentation partner is very often the way to get to value quickly by going further faster. They will help you identify and manage risk as well as communicating the benefits.
How do you scale your experimentation capability? Remember, it's a whole experience that makes for successful outcomes. Explore how you can experiment across end-to-end user experiences, identify partners or where you can measure offsite touch points and include that in your analyses. Break out complex journeys into context, use case and device and test specifically for these situations. There are important differences to explore. You might feel like you never have enough data or results are inconclusive, so adapt and test again and learn from your mistakes. As you build out the benefits case, grow the investment stages. Don't try and go too fast too soon. Involve enterprise IT, data systems, integrations, and a mature open-based infrastructure is key to success at scale. And when you work something out that works, save it, codify and share that. Build internal training, work with experts and partners to build your capability.
So experimentation should not only be a powerful way to improve quickly, but also it should be fun and invigorating for you and your colleagues. It manages risk by anticipating change and making decisions based on the best thing you have, measurements and insights and experience of your colleagues. It focuses on value and benefits of your investment in digital and other channels in a sector where proving value is incredibly important. It builds a culture of awareness of user needs, customer centricity and context across your teams. It opens up a flatter hierarchy with faster decision-making and more engaged teams breaking down silos. And it helps you build a better, more adaptive set of services that change with the needs of the world in which they exist. So we hope you've enjoyed this and taken some value from it. We've really enjoyed putting it together. We'd love to talk more if you want to either begin or continue your experimentation journey. So hit us up on the website, or you can download our 2022 report, which looks at digital evolution. It explores how digital transformation is being superseded by a more iterative, experimental, data-driven approach to building digital futures for organizations of all sizes and purposes, based on real research with thousands of respondents across different sectors and regions. You can learn more about the benefits of digital experimentation there. So I wonder if we have time for questions.
Yes, I think we still have time for questions. So if anyone have a question for our speaker, Dom and Justin, you can use the chat function or the Q&A tab if you submit your question there, so they can answer it. So while we're waiting for the others to type in their question, I wonder, do you have any advice for building an internal business case for experimentation?
Yeah, I mean, as we've said, it's important to start doing it early, because again, quite often with something like this, that the templates and the approaches for business or benefits case, it's less likely to be a business case in public services, but benefits case, there may be the history or culture of taking a long-term view of things. And experimentation needs to take shorter term view, and shorter term, the objectives are over a long term, the benefits are over the long term, but there needs to be kind of faster decision making. So it's about starting early and evolving the existing benefits case templates and approaches that you have. Also, project management and things tend to be over big, long periods, and evolving that process and bringing stakeholders on the journey. So as we said, an OKR methodology or OKR framework can really help with this in terms of understanding what are the overall outcomes. So it might be about cost savings, it might be about improving patient outcomes if you're in medical, and then being really clear about what measures we can gather based on the changes that we're going to make. So start small, have regular contact with your stakeholders to bring them on the journey with you, and as much as possible put the data, simplify it sometimes, and in terms of having simple conclusions, but put the data in front of them as much as possible, and that should build the support that you need.
I think I would reiterate everything Dom said there, and I think we talked a bit about it, but it's building models that support the case for experimentation as well. It's difficult to be sure on the impacts because obviously you haven't done it yet, but by coming up with a hypothesis about what the potential impacts of different experiments might be, I think that helps with the business case. So I'm a big supporter of creating the right sort of models to support getting the support in.
Thank you, Justin. Okay, so we have another question. What if we don't have the in-house capability or experience to implement an experimentation program?
Well, again, I think that's about starting small and manageably. It was interesting. A client once said to me, if we're not designing our own services, what are we doing here? And I think that there's an element of truth in that, is that, within your organizations and within your departments and within your teams, you've all got great ideas because you've all got experience, very valuable experience, both at frontline and in management and leadership around, the trends of how things are, how the sector is moving, what your users and end users need. And those ideas exist. So really, it's about translating those ideas into a set of experiments that you can test. So working with partners really helps. There are, for example, we run some kind of introductory workshops that help you kind of take all of your insights and turn them into some very sort of specific experimental approaches, but also getting some advice on the platforms and how you can start simply and easily by integrating experimentation platforms. Optimizely is one that does this as well. You can run alongside the technology you already have. So you don't need to completely re-platform. You can run this alongside it that will just manage your experiments for you. So that's another way of getting started. sure Justin's got more to say about technology aspect of
No,
things.
no, I think you probably hit the nail pretty much on the head there, Dom. I think if getting a partner alongside you to help support you in those initial stages is probably key, because, as we said, it's hard to get started and it's hard to scale it. So having a partner can help support you in those early days, but ultimately success for someone like Netcel is actually we help you build up your own internal capability. So ultimately you can do that yourself.
Right. Okay, so I think Dom mentioned about platforms. So there's a question about what platforms are available for experimentation.
I think that the list of experimentation platforms is probably fairly extensive. You're talking probably over 100 different platforms. Obviously, we would say Optimize is probably the best platform out there, of course, but with a slight bias on that. But I think it's very much about establishing what pace you want to run at, what do you need today and what might you need tomorrow, and getting the right platform in that's appropriate for you today. And would allow you to grow a bit as well, because as with the case of technology platforms, there are different levels of platforms, there's different budgets associated with them. That's about understanding the value and what you want to get out of it for the next 12 months maybe, and then what does the roadmap look beyond that for the next 3 years. But as Dom said, or as he certainly alluded to, putting an experimentation platform isn't about replacing everything you've got, it's adding to what you've got. Most platforms out there today will integrate with your existing technology stack. So it's not a case of you must get one from one particular vendor.
Thanks, Justin. Okay, so I think we have time for one more question. So if anyone have a question, please do type it now. But yeah, I have one more question here, Justin and Dom. How do we do it if we have a CMS which doesn't have any experimentation capability?
So I want Dom to start with,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean, this is exactly as we've been talking about. So many CMS platforms have got a level of A/B testing, which I suppose is the start of an experimentation program. But if you're looking to build that up and scale that out, then you don't need to. It's pretty much back to the similar sort of answer I gave before. It's not about having to go to a particular vendor. It's about establishing your platform needs, your organizational needs, and then looking at the market to establish the right technology for you. And people like Netcel can help with that. And I'm sure if you've got existing incumbent partners, they can help you identify the right sort of platform. But it's definitely not a case of if your CMS platform doesn't have it, you can't do an experimentation. It's definitely, they're complementary technologies, I think is how I would phrase it.
All right, so thank you so much, Justin and Dom, and thank you everyone who joined us for this session. Yeah, before we end the session, either Dom or Justin, do you have one thing that that you think the people that are listening in might or could do to start this, or how they could have a conversation with you about this specific topic?
I mean, I think the thing to start with is to come up with some ideas for some experiments that you could run. So have a look at your analytics, but also have a in terms of where people are dropping off or where people are having difficulties, where you can make conclusions from that. But also ask around, talk to your frontline teams and your frontline colleagues in terms of the kind of challenges that your users are having, and then we could potentially work up. Within one of these workshops, work up a plan for some experiments that you could run to prove the value of this and to get you started. And also it helps you get you thinking in that experimentational way. So that would be the kind of, you can do this in a kind of half-day workshop setting with a bit of kind of homework in advance of it in terms of looking at your analytics and looking at some of your kind of feedback and stuff dropped in suggestion boxes in reception or whatever, where you have face-to-face interaction with your users. But you can from that we can build out a kind of experimentation proof of value and a way of getting started and getting a taste for it. Or also, if you are already established at experimentation, this could look at new ways of being able to optimize those experiments.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you so much for the great way to end the session. Thank you so much for your time, Dom and Justin. And thank you everyone for your time. Have a good day.
Thanks very much for
Thank
coming.
you.
Cheers, everyone.